We're just going to lay out this image, and my goal in this is just to get a feel for the space and the distance I'm trying to get into the painting. So first thing I do is just sort of get comfortable with the surface and my painting distance. And I've got a little bit of turpentine so it dries quickly. And I'm trying to create a sense of tension between here and the edge of the canvas. So I'm kind of establishing a ratio that'll let me step into the painting. And I'm going to use that ratio to tell me when to end this wedge. So I'm going to pretty carefully figure out where that's going to end. And then I'll just start referencing the photograph, but that's going to change pretty quickly. And get a sense of this spit of land. I'm going to have a large dark that holds a corner of the canvas. And then I want to have a bit of a background reference so I have some sense of distance. And so I'm just going to sit back and look at that basic layout. And this looks a little steep to me right now. I'm jumping in too quickly, so I'm going to try to break that down a little bit, and I'll change color in order to do that, because if I don't change color, I can't see what it is I've done. So I'll come back and change color a little bit, and I'll probably drop this just a touch. And then reference this angle, and then try to slow our speed, which we're going back to this spot. So I'm going to break this edge up, and just to check it, you see, just by making it zig, by squaring it off, it already looks a little more. We're retarding our speed to get back there. Okay, and then I'm going to look at this dark mass. And my goal is to kind of get us over that landmass a little bit there. Okay, so that's a nice start. The next thing I'll do is I'll take a mixed black and a large flat brush. And this is about a 2-inch brush. And I'm just going to take as much paint as I can and sort of scrub in a shape here. And I try to do a random shape. I try not to be too controlled with this, because I don't want to be locked into anything. And I want that shape to be at least 1/6 of the canvas, probably a little bit more. And since at this point I don't really have a subject matter other than the distance, I don't want to commit too much. I'm going to stand back and take a look at this before I get too much farther along. And I've got a little too much tension right here. So I'll open that up a bit and step it back more. So I'm laying in this black shape to hold the canvas, and I want to make sure that I'm stepping down. So I'm looking at the bottom of this shape, and I'm looking at I want everything to kind of put a lot of pressure right into this spot. So I'm angling things so I'm establishing a great deal of pressure and tension between this edge. So this back landmass has to drop down, and this has to be tall enough to feel that pressure. So I'm going to drop this I'm going to make this darker so I get more weight over here, and that takes a lot of paint. So I'm just going to block it in. And I want to get a sense of that size. And usually the size of this dark mass should reflect the shape and layout of the canvas. So if the canvas were horizontal, I'd have the dark mass as a horizontal shape. But since the canvas is it is square, then this is going to be a relatively symmetrical shape. So it's going to be a round or a square. And I'm looking at this tension here. So I want this to slide down. That's going to move me down a little bit more. So I'm going to make sure I have that sense of tension. So I'm going to be somewhere in here is going to be the end of that point. And I haven't locked that in yet. And now I'm going to look at that feeling of tension, and I may step back just enough so I get a feel for it, and I think that's going to be fine. So in order for me to see this now, I'm going to start to change my color a little bit and sculpt what's happening. So I'm going to just push this down. I'm picking a color that's just an innocuous color that's going to let me get a sense of softness, so I can step forward in space and back, and then forward and back. Okay, then I'm going to switch to a drawing brush, and I'm going to look at my positions. And I'm going to switch to a color, and since this is somewhere in here is my distance, I'm going to use that as a ratio. And once I establish this ratio, I'm going to build on it. So everything's going to be referenced to that ratio. So this is 1. This should be about 2. That's about 3 now, so that's got to be about 2. So move that in about here. That's about there. And I want to see that. Just as a reminder, this early stage, I'm going to leave these marks down so I have a reference. And these ratios make our eye movement pretty interesting through the painting. So that's not equal. So once we've established that, I'm going to keep building on it. And let me just see if there's a number. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's about 1/5 of the canvas. So that's about it. And I'm going to leave those marks in as long as I can, because they help me figure out where I'm going to put things. So I've gotten that mass in. And the next thing I want to do is establish some sense of distance here. So I'm going to give myself a relatively strong set of pure colors in here, just so I can get a reference to this. I'm going to make sure I have enough paint here. This is a rough surface canvas, so I'm going to have to put on a lot of paint to start to control the surface of the canvas. And that means, okay, so now I'm going to switch brushes and images and clean up a bit and make a wash for that back area. So that means cleaning this crap up. And putting in a lighter wash for the back. And a wash means that it's got a little more medium than usual. So I tend not to put in more than about 10% medium. But on these first stages, it's like a selective undertoning. So I'm not really worried about losing the paint quality. I'm just getting a color sense. So I'm just going to block in, and I'm not worried about the edges either. I'm just going to block in a value. And I want to practice laying in kind of a random brush stroke and just scrubbing in a color. It's really a lot like getting dressed. You know, you look at you kind of lay out your clothes and get them all on, and then you figure out, then you tighten things up and cinch up your belt and put on the rest of your jewelry. Right now I'm just laying everything out and seeing if it looks good. And I might have to change my belt, change my shirt. There are two big philosophies about putting in, when you put in the sky. I tend to put it in toward the end of the session rather than of the first early part of the painting, rather than start with it, because I don't know what the colors are going to be yet. So I'm just sort of blocking in a relative color, and I'm going to check this line out. So I have room for the water, so I'm going to just take some much whiter paint now and just sort of have that water be reflective, and I'm going to go against the shape that water is going to hold. So the water is going to flow this way, but I'm going to block it in with a series of vertical marks, just so I can get more information. Again, it slows the eye down. And this is just turpentine I'm using right now. And again, I'm trying to get that sense of tension, so I'm going to make sure I maybe even flatten that water out here and flatten it off, so I get more of a downward shift.